so I was looking at, I was looking at Yale because I had heard about Yale's programming and how they had it like pass fail the first semester. And so I was looking at Yale, and then I talked to other alum for, there was a U of C alum who had gone to Yale. And so I talked to her, but she said, you're from Michigan. You should look at Michigan. And when I was at U of C, my friend had, so we were at this, it was an event, and it was for encouraging students to be involved with like public interest. And she nudges me, my friend Marcia. She's one of my sister friends. And so she said, "Hey, there's a lady over there. Her name's Michelle Obama. And she went to Harvard Law, and I know you want to be a lawyer, so you should go talk to her." And so I was kind of shy, but I was like telling myself, "Get over it, girlfriend, go over there." So I went over and talked to her. She gave me her card. I met with her, and she helped me with my law school application. And she has told me, she's like, "Well, my husband is teaching over at the University of Chicago Law School, so you should take his class. You should check it out." So I went and checked out his class. My friends actually took his class. It was a class on like something like racism in the law, something like that. And I thought about taking the class, but then, my dad was helping to pay for undergrad, and he was really like, "Hurry up, hurry, hurry, hurry." For him, he was one of the first recipients of the Upward Bound Scholarship, like when he went to Western. And so he graduated in 2.5 years from college. And I said to him, "Why did you graduate in 2.5 years?" He's like, "Look, I came from a family of 16. I didn't know if the money was going to run out, so I had to hurry up." So he hurried up and got his undergrad, and, he got a poli-sci undergrad and master's in poli-sci. And then back to me. So he was saying, "Girl, this law school or undergrad is not cheap." So he's like, "You need to hurry up." So I hurried up so I could graduate. I found out what I needed to do to graduate early. Then I found out what I needed to do to graduate with honors. I hurried up and to get out. And then he said to me, and I won't ever forget this. He was like, "When you get to law school, you're on your own." And, I understand that those student loans are no joke,
Right.
yeah, for
Yeah.
law school. Yeah.
Yeah.
My mom's dad actually was a lawyer. So he had gone to Morehouse. My grandfather, and this is at a time when, very few Black folk were college educated. I mean, my dad's dad had a fourth grade education, and my mom's dad was a lawyer. Like that's the distinction. That's the contrast here. So he had gone to law school on the GI Bill. The GI Bill was applied as everything was in the country at the time, kind of using racist criteria, but a lot of the schools would allow one Black student to come in on the GI Bill. And so he happened to be admitted to Boston University, I think it was. They were all in the North, but Boston University on the GI Bill to go to law school after serving in World War II. And got his degree and went back to Durham, North Carolina, or went to Durham, North Carolina. The family was from South Carolina. At that point, my mom had been born, who was the oldest of four, and he began his work as an attorney. And he ultimately, as many did, became active in the civil rights movement. And so was an attorney who was actively engaged in civil rights work. And as a kid, I mean, didn't know or appreciate all of that, but he was definitely my hero. This guy was so articulate and so funny and so just everything. And he had flaws. He was a drunk, but he was this happy drunk. Like when he would drink, he would just get so happy. And, he would talk even more. It was just like easy to spend time with him. He was actually the best man at my wedding. Yeah, like definitely my hero. And I'm named after him. His name was Daniel George Sampson. He actually ultimately became the dean of the law school at North Carolina Central, which was an HBCU in Durham. So he was dean of the law school there for a period of time. And his story, his oldest son, so the second oldest in the family, my mom's younger brother, went to law school and was practicing in Atlanta and had founded his own firm with another guy uh, Thomas Sampson Kennedy, Thomas Sampson Kennedy and something. And his name was Tommy Sampson. And they were one of the only Black law firms in Atlanta at the time. And then my mom, who had been a teacher, and so all of the stories had been about the kids, at dinner time had been about the kids that she was working with and whatnot. And she was an amazing teacher. She went back to law school after kind of burning out of teaching and then got into juvenile defense work. And so the stories at dinner time continued to be about the kids that she was working with, but now it was juvie instead of students in her classes. And the combination of the three, and if I'm being completely honest, like my just uncertainty about what to do. Like I had a degree in history and I thought I might want to teach, but I wasn't sure. Like I hadn't loved studying history as much as I thought I was going to. And really hadn't found anything that I wanted to teach. Like I didn't want to go get a master's in history. I just wasn't sure. I thought I would actually go do the Peace Corps for a while, and I got admitted to law school. And mom said, "Nope, you need to go." And I listened to my mom, so I went. Um, and that was why I went. Yeah, I had a professor who was a dear friend and still is a dear friend, John Rubidoux, who said to me, I'll write you a letter of recommendation and you're going to hate it. And I went. He wrote me the letter of recommendation. I got in, as I mentioned, uh, got a scholarship to attend University of Michigan Law School and went, and I did hate it. He was exactly right.
I mean, it was well the way they did the classes, they were like I want to say it was like was it four classes of 90 or was it three classes of 90? I remember there were classes of 90 and they kind of paired it out where they had three Black girls. Like in my section, we had a class of 90, a section of 90 rather, and they had three Black girls and three Black males, kind of like to spread it out, spread us out. And so it could be intense. I mean, if you came to deal with racial issues, it's the same stuff I've dealt with since the beginning, since from elementary school, high school, college, like when they have a Black issue come up and then, it's kind of like, okay, what do you think? Black person, or you feel the teachers may not always put you on the spot, but you feel like, okay, they're talking about Black issues. I feel like I need to talk about it. And so that's intense. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, people were friendly in school, in law school. I did form friendships. I mean, I would say that I had tighter friendships from college than law school. Like I do have friends from law school. But I don't know. There was kind of like a certain level of like detachment going on. I don't, maybe it's because it's law school and it's just very serious and everybody's so intense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is not the first time I've heard this, and I definitely understand what you mean. So, um, yeah, I mean, when you look back on your time here, are there specific professors or courses that had a significant impact on the direction that you took your career after graduating?
Yes, so I took crim law with Yale Camazar, who was amazing, and he was talking about, the experience of African American males, like, some of the things about like why they run from the police and how he it was different for him, like when he was growing up as a young man, like the police, he would make mistakes, but the police would give him a chance, but they don't necessarily do that for Black males in New York. And so that was kind of really good. It was like validating, to hear that. And he was really exciting and boisterous. We had Saul Levmore for torts. He was intense, but oh my gosh, like it was the Socratic method was real intense. Like it was, yeah, he was very intense. I had Catherine McKinnon. I had sex equality, which I really enjoyed that class.
That's
Yeah, I enjoyed that. I took Native American law and I took Native American law and then I had a research class with Professor Kanji So I really liked that. I took constitutionalism in South Africa with Professor Chambers, and Carthy Govender, who was from South Africa. And then I went to South Africa and did the externship there. And so I really liked those classes, like crim law, Native American law, um, the constitutionalism in South Africa. I took a foreign, was it like a foreign law class? It was a professor was it was okay. Um, Civil procedure, oh my gosh, no, it was early in the morning. I mean, it's funny because I'm a litigator, so we use that, but I'm like, oh my God, it was boring, it was dry, it was intense. And um, so yeah, so I took tax. My dad's like, my dad took tax, so he's like, you gotta take tax. And that was intense. That was a pretty intense class.
Again, it's interesting because um, I think the World Trade Center that happened, and I had graduated. Um, and so I was working, but I remember the day that it happened, and I remember because my brother lived in New York, who also went to the University of Michigan, and um, trying to call him, and my parents trying to call him, but phones were all not working. Cell phones were not working at the time because of the volume of calls. Um, OJ Simpson, I just had this conversation within the last couple of days about how, depending upon how old folks are, there's certain things that stand out. Like previous generations will say they remember where they were when uh, Martin Luther King was assassinated or JFK. People remember where they were when Diana died in the car crash with her boyfriend. Um, OJ, I was at a restaurant called Larco's on Big Beaver Road in Troy, and when the OJ verdict came down, and I can just remember um, how the responses of people in the room were different. Like the few Black folks that were in the room were felt vindication and joy, and you could see anger across most of the white folks' faces. And it's just very interesting how a legal case um, turned into like racial divide, and that's the first time that you have really seen a trial for that happen. Obviously, Rodney King, and we've seen multiple instances from Rodney King through George Floyd. Um, that was um, uh, an obvious violation of justice, just all the way around, and police protocol. So, I mean, there's definitely amongst friends, just anything from disbelief to anger to sadness. But there wasn't really any like campus protests. I recall, I mean, Doris McCree being a very significant person and a go-to for Black folks who had challenges at school. Um, and like you said, Balsa was strong back then as an organization. Um, but outside of those couple of things, I mean, those of us who were Black and in law school were close, particularly all those that were my year. I still talk to many of them today, and so I think more so than what the school did, I think that we just had a close knit group ourselves and supported each other.
Uh, our class was such a good class, um, in which to be a Black student, specifically because there were so many other students of color. We had a great relationship at Balsa with the Hispanic Law Student Association and the other affinity groups, the Asian Pacific American Law Student Association and others. And so there was a lot of collegiality and even unity among the students of color. And then because of I would actually argue that because there were so many more women at the law school, in our class as well. I think that was incredibly helpful. Like it just was a period during which historical boundaries were being breached in all of the best ways. And there were still plenty of white men. There were still plenty of conservative thinkers. Like, you know, none of that was under threat by any stretch of the imagination. But the doors were kind of thrown open to others as well. And there had been obviously Black students, you know, who'd been there before, but not in numbers. And I think there was just a safety in numbers, kind of a emotional and mental safety. Even if you'd been physically safe before, like there was an emotional and mental safety that occurred in numbers that probably just hadn't been available to previous classes. That was great. There certainly was still pressure to perform, and a lot of pride when people did. So there were two women in our class, Becky Ross and Karen. I cannot remember Karen's last name. Her maiden last name anyway. So, who were both on Law Review, and who did really well. And so like I think we had enough numbers that Black students were involved in everything. Like there was a student of color in every group, you know what I mean? Like, and that just made the place feel a little more welcoming and a little more kind of open, and it made it feel like everything was doable. I think in a way that maybe hadn't existed for some previous classes. I mean, I even remember like third years commenting on kind of how much more lively we were as first years than they had been as first years, just a lot less intimidated. So I think that was all true. The school was still figuring out how to support students effectively. So what was missing was, you know, professors of color, administrators of color, like folks who you could go to. There was a woman named Doris McKee. I don't know if you've heard about Miss Doris already. No? So Doris McKee was like the mother / grandmother to all of us. She was her husband had been a judge on the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, the U.S. Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, I think. And she was just kind of an unofficial administrator. She probably had an official title at the law school, and she was like the person that we all would go to. If you just needed somebody to talk to, whatever it was, that's who you went to. But she was the only one. Like that was literally it, you know? So like that support system didn't exist. The school was making efforts. There was a program called MAP, which students of color could participate in as first years, just to meet each other kind of before classes started and all of that. And then I do remember also just there were whole sets of classes that were absolute Greek to me. I mean, commercial transactions, like I just had no idea what that was. I knew about litigation. You know, my uncle had been a litigator, my granddad had been a litigator, but even more than that, like there were shows like LA Law and whatnot that you'd see on TV. And so I kind of had a sense of what litigation was. I had no idea what this whole world of commercial transactions and property and kind of all of the transactional work that lawyers did, like that was all Greek to me. And it was less about being Black and more about just being, you know, a kid from Detroit. But yeah, there were just things you didn't know, and a little bit of a shortage of kind of people who looked like you in leadership positions that you could go to. I was really moved. I remember Alan Page, who was a former Purple People, he'd been a professional football player, came to speak at an event one of our Butch Carpenter dinner, the big dinner that we held annually for Balsa. And we brought him in to speak. He had just been elected to the state Supreme Court in Minnesota, and was noteworthy because he'd been a former professional football player and a Hall of Famer. He was like a great football player. He was like a really good jurist. And we brought him in to speak at this event, and he announced, "Hey, I'm accepting applications for clerkships." And I had never, I didn't even know what that really was. That was like what folks on Law Review did. And B, to the extent that I knew what it was, I just wasn't interested in it. And I went to my summer clerkship that summer, and I happened to mention it to the woman who ran the office. Said, "Yeah, this this judge said this and was inviting applications." And she said, "Oh, you should do that." And I respected her immensely. And I was like, "What do you mean I should do that? Why?" And she told me and convinced me. And so I applied. But like finding people like Alan Page or who you could talk to was not easy. It's not. That was maybe what I remember more than anything.
I didn't really like law school. I had to learn what I was supposed to be doing, right? Because I get caught up in cases and didn't know why I was reading them. So I learned the game of law school, but I decided that I had two choices. I could treat law school like trade school, right? Or I could treat law school like getting a master's or advanced degree in like the humanities. So as soon as I was able to pick, I hated exam classes. I loved paper classes. And some exam classes, they were fine if I liked the subject, but most of it, like the whole first year, I was just like, what is this? Yeah, I had a hard time really finding the joy. Like I had classmates, and I'm sure you do too. You might be one of those people. They just are joyful about the law. They love the law. Nah, that wasn't me in that whole first year, with the exception of we were allowed to take one elective. And I think I took like political philosophy. Like it saved me. I read Rawls, I wrote a paper. So one, my grades in my paper classes and my grades in my exam classes, like night and day. It's like it's not even the same student. And then by the time I got to my third year, I think my last semester I had one exam and everything else was a paper. I might have had two exams in the fall. So that being said, I spent a lot of time sort of thinking about bigger things, like how the classes sort of fit and what they have in common. And at that point, you're beginning to see critical legal studies is fairly out there in the lead, but predominantly white, predominantly male. Then you're beginning to see critical race theory. So we're talking about, you go back to like Derek Bell. Then feminist legal theory, right? All of this stuff is sort of happening, and I find I'm way more interested in that than what's going on in class, at least first year. So I spent more time reading law review articles that weren't going to be on anybody's exam than the cases. And I had one professor for torts, big feminist. She was a visitor from UCLA. I learned no torts, none. I learned feminist legal theory, but I learned no torts. I mean, I know torts now. I mean, clearly. All right, so let me just, I didn't like law school, but when all is said and done, I did the bar review. I took the exam. I'm barred in California. It only took once. So clearly I figured it out, right? But it was a slow start in the beginning because what I really was interested in wasn't what we were learning.
What's so interesting is at the top of the admissions process, even faculty who did not believe in or had concerns about affirmative action were still really clear about expressing their support for the students who are currently admitted. So they had kind of a principled objection to affirmative action, but they always couched it in terms of, but everyone here is capable. Everyone here should be here. We support the students who are here. And that was interesting because that was an ongoing set of messages. That was a kind of a messaging that was continuous. So it felt very much like, even though there was heated debate about affirmative action, I at least felt like very much like the faculty acknowledged my capacity and capability and my ability to excel in this space. So I never felt like you shouldn't be here. They may have felt like this isn't the right policy to get you here, but it never felt like you shouldn't be here, which sounds weird, but it's a difference. It's a new.
Also was great. We had a ton of fun. Good group of folks. Yeah, we actually had a little office, that we could decorate, and then, played music and just made it like home for folks, which was wonderful. The Haitian Refugee Project was this effort, as I mentioned earlier, to help Haitian refugees apply for and gain asylum in the United States. And a number of us had gone down to somewhere in Florida. I'm going to guess Miami, but I don't even recall where, to help submit applications and whatnot. And came back. And this was also a time of kind of reawakened political activity on campus. So, U of M was pretty legend for what had gone on during, Vietnam and kind of other earlier eras of where student activism had been high. We were coming off of an era where not a ton of that had taken place, let's say, for the previous few years, but South Africa and investment policies of institutions like universities in South Africa was coming under scrutiny, or had been under scrutiny. And then these humanitarian crises like the mass exodus of refugees from Haiti were emerging, and there was just an opportunity for us to do something about it as law students. These refugees from Haiti were largely low income, coarse people of color, and the narrative about them, interesting, like you still hear it today, but the narrative about them was wildly unhealthy and unfriendly. These folks were victims of political abuses in a political system and whatnot that was just about preserving power, and they were just looking for an opportunity at a better life. And then they would show up in Florida, and yes, there are always issues with folks needing to learn the culture and whatnot, but they were providing providing a lot of economic once integrated, would provide a tremendous economic boost to Southern Florida. So long story short, we had a chance to just bring some attention to the issue by fasting, and did. And it was, refugees were being housed in pretty inhumane conditions at Guantanamo Bay. They were being imprisoned basically for fleeing for their lives. And so we built kind of a mock prison, up on the steps of the law school, of the library, the reading hall, and held a press conference. Kind of, we would each get behind the kind of bars of this mock prison, and he gave a series of speeches about what was going on, and why we should care. And I had a chance to participate, and it was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, it's not, the professors probably wouldn't want me to be saying this, but I mean, I would not be pigeonholed into, I'm at law school, so I have to take the traditional law track. I mean, when people go to law schools traditionally, like Michigan, Harvard, Yale, etc., 90% of those kids want to go to a big law firm and make a lot of money, or they want to go to a clerkship. But very few are saying, I want to go to a startup, or I want to go to private equity. And maybe those times have changed because, again, I graduated 30 years ago. And so things may have changed now. Maybe there are some students taking that track. But I also think that Black students in particular, because historically Black folks aren't as exposed to those other types of businesses, then you're less inclined to even think about going to do that. We're thinking about safety. Let me get a job, make sure I get a paycheck every 2 weeks, pay down debt if I have it, save to buy a house, start a family, etc. Versus thinking, let me go take less money in this startup because I believe in the jockey, and I'm going to take equity in lieu of some salary because I'm going to hope that I'm going to swing for the fences, and this is going to, we're going to win big. So I would just encourage people to explore all of their options and get exposed to as much as that as possible. And I would also encourage students at the law school, even if you are not interested in going into business, to go across the street to Ross and take a couple classes, because it will inevitably help you in whatever that you do.